Welcome to episode 150 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast about using, learning, and just sharing your passion for Linux and everything open source. Destination Linux is meant for all experience levels, whether you're a guru of sudo or just heard about Linux for the first time today. And I'm Michael, and with me today, in honor of Thanksgiving, are the stovetop stuffing of Linux, Zeb, Noah, and Ryan. So, Noah, how's your week been?
It's been good. I've really enjoyed the fact. It was funny. So Tuesday night, last question I get on the show is a piece of feedback, and somebody goes, "How do you balance life and all the work?" And I went, because I have really firm limits. I have firm limits in the sense, like there are things that I'm not going to infringe on. And so immediately after that, the next day, I wrap up with work at 6 o'clock. We called it a day, and I spent the rest of the time at home with family. And of course, by time at home with family, what I mean is playing a little Rocket League, eating some food, relaxing, and of course, sitting downstairs in my lab, coming up with all sorts of crazy Linux ideas and testing different Linux software and trying different Linux projects that I haven't had any idea that worked, and came across a project that has gone completely open source. The name of the project is Blue Cherry DVR, and they used to have some components of their software stack that were open source and some of them that were proprietary, and I just always felt like it was a better user interface than ZoneMinder. And go to their site to go check out what they have going on, and they've completely GPL'd their entire software stack from top to bottom. The whole thing is open source and on GitHub. Downloaded it, spun it up on a VM, works fantastically, supports Lux, you can have encrypted security camera recording, works with all the major brands. Like, it's a really cool piece of software, and so I'm
awesome.
Kind of digging into that and seeing what's possible and what works with it, because it's kind of a major iteration. For years, we've been kind of waiting for really good IP security camera software to come to Linux, and ZoneMinder has been kind of our best answer thus far. And there's a lot of rough edges, to be honest with you. And so I was glad to see that there's another player in this game. Actually, there's a couple I've come across now this weekend.
But there's a big undertaking probably in switching, because you have quite an infrastructure built out. Right? Yeah,
not only that, like it's our clients too, right? Because their systems will undoubtedly change if I make a different change. But the thing is, like, I try and look at the big picture, right? Unify is snooping on people's internal networks and sending that information back home, and they're only turning that off once people throw a fit. They've discontinued their original Unify camera series that's open and you can run on your own hardware and run as many cameras as you want on your own Debian box. And now you have to buy their stupid hardware thing that's locked in, and it only supports 20 cameras. And let's face it, if I'm going to put a camera and a microphone on the inside of my house, gosh darn it, do I want that thing to be secure? And do I want that thing to be under my control? And how am I supposed to trust that on some random company's infrastructure? I want that on my infrastructure. I want that on sweet Linux. So the nice thing about Blue Iris is I'm able to use Lux. I'm able to use a standard CentOS box or a standard Ubuntu box, and then it's just a software package that runs on top and stores, MKVs of video files around my house on an encrypted hard drive. Like, that seems like a trustworthy way to go. I'm very comfortable with that model. I wish there was a mobile app, to be honest with you, and there isn't. So there is some work, and there's some more investigation and exploratory to go. Synology is a Linux-based box, obviously not open source, but it sounds like they have a lot of cool features. So I'm going to give that a shot. And then there's some other software that actually runs on Linux, but also is an open source. So I want to give that a shut too, just to see.
I love Synology's interfaces, but that's the biggest problem with them is they're not open source.
Right.
So, utilizing it over FreeNAS, which I was using a Synology NAS prior to, it was an easy solution because I'm going to go the open source route. But they actually have a pretty good interface, and I did see that they have this new camera system. It's interesting because I'm running across a similar problem as you, Noah, in that I've just been seeing all of these as I'm getting more into reading about and learning about ethical pen testing and hacking and things like that. One of the things I'm coming across a lot in these communities is with video cameras in people's homes. And apparently a lot of these big retail systems that people are buying and putting in their homes by big companies are very easily hackable to the point where they basically they have websites that just list all of these open cameras that they found, and you could go on there and sit there and stare at people.
73,000 cameras on the site you're talking about.
Yes.
70,000 people have bought cameras at Best Buy, taken them into their homes, put them in their bedrooms, in their kids' bedrooms, in their living rooms, in their kitchens, wherever. And they put this on the internet without knowing what they're doing. And the site collects all of those cameras and streams them, and you just create an account and you can watch people in their house. It's terrifying. But honestly, everybody wants to make those sites out to be like the bad guy and the creep. And the truth is, you're the idiot. Like, you need to take your stuff off the internet. That site is just showing you what actual creeps are going to do to you if you're not paying attention. So there's a number of things that come into play there. Like, what cameras do you buy? Will they offer firmware updates? Are they secure on the internet, or do they need to be on their own VLAN, or maybe their own separate network altogether? Like, we have to have answers to those questions. And as a company who prides itself on installing those things for people, I feel like it's incumbent upon me to take these into my house and say, before we put these into your business, into your house, like, I need to know for sure that I'm comfortable with them, and then I can recommend them to you. And that process has been really enlightening.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with, I was looking at my own system going, camera placement is something where I'm more interested in the security part, where I want an alert if somebody is getting into my house or whatever. That's my main purpose for the cameras, not to watch my kids or anything else, right? So for that, I think camera placement is important. You have to keep in mind that even if you have the most secure system set up, someone still could, if they wanted to, pick you out and decide to get into your stuff. But what are they going to see and what are they going to hear? And a lot of times for me, the answer is I put a lot of my cameras outside my home instead of inside my home. So they're at the doorways, they're at the windows, they're at places where I would know somebody who's trying to get in my home would go to. But if somebody hacked them, all they're going to be staring at is my yard.
So, playing devil's advocate, I have a dedicated 16-port PoE switch. It's not connected to anything else other than the cameras, and a dedicated Debian box that has Lux encryption with a strong passphrase on the hard disk, required at boot up, the key nowhere stored on the disk itself. So the process of firing that box up is taking a USB key, plugging it in, and using that to get the Lux header, typing in my passphrase, letting the box boot up, and now the NVR is going to run. It records cameras inside or outside of my house. But the only way anybody can ever get to that footage is if they were able, if you had FBI level forensics come into the house and within 2 minutes disconnect the box, dump the contents of RAM out, and hopefully extract that massively long passphrase that I can't even remember. Yeah. Like, I feel like the threat model, while not non-existent, is so low, it's hardly worth considering.
Yeah. But don't you think about camera placement at the same time? I mean, even with all of that little threat vector that you wouldn't want to stick a camera in your bedroom,
So I guess I mean, obviously, there's no real advantage of camera in a bedroom, right? Like, well, from a security standpoint. But I guess as I kind of go through it, I guess my thought process kind of goes like this. I want to be comfortable in my home. And that means that any technology that I implement in my home has to be secure, open source, run on Linux by default, those things. Otherwise, I'm just not comfortable with it. And then once I establish that, then my thinking goes something like this. Just because I live in 2019 and there are bad people that want to do bad things with technology, that shouldn't stop me from enjoying the convenience of technology. And so if technology exists wherein I can have a camera downstairs in my kids' playroom and they're playing downstairs and I can be upstairs working on Thanksgiving dinner and I don't feel like a less responsible parent because I'm not checking on them every 15 minutes. I'm checking on them every 30 seconds because I'm just, as I walk past that screen, I'm looking at them and watching what's happening and getting a real-time image of what's happening downstairs with my kids. And if there is something that I need to go correct, I can do that when it's necessary. Like, to me, that seems like that's where technology is supposed to be. I'm supposed to be able to trust this stuff. We have encryption. We have software that is able to protect from prying eyes, even when it's things like the government. We have the tools to prevent that. We just need to apply it in a logical, rational way to keep bad eyes off of our stuff and be able to still enjoy the convenience of it.
I think this is where laws are needed. I mean, I'm not a big proponent in government getting involved in everything, and generally that can turn bad. But in this case, you go to the stores and your average person is not going to be listening to this podcast. They're not going to understand the security. They read on the box that it says it's secure, might even say somewhere on the box the word encryption. They go, oh, that sounds really cool. And they go home, they plug it in, and they have this cool app that they connect to, and they assume everything is fine. And they spend a massive amount of money. It's not like this stuff is cheap. They're spending $500-$600 or more on these devices they're putting on the home, but that's not enough for the companies. Then they got to take your information and have backdoors and everything else. And then they don't even actually apply real security. And then you have to worry that they're going to abandon the project and you just spent $600 on something that's non-existent, which anymore, which is, there's just a lot of issues with this technology, but you're not wrong. What you say there is some of the convenience you lose. But to me, I am looking for a good, secure solution. But I'm probably going to give up on anything inside my home being connected to the internet. So I'll keep every camera inside my home on a DVR that just records to a DVR and has screens, and everything outside my home would be something that I would hook to a...
So you and I are on the same page. Page. The only slight twist there is the cameras that I'm recording to a DVR that's inside of my home happens to run over Cat5 cable and happens to use an IP protocol, right?
Gotcha.
But there's no connection to the internet whatsoever on that system.
Nice.
It's a completely standalone closed circuit 16
that makes sense.
PoE switch. So there's no access from the outside. And then my thought is one of two things. Either when I leave the house and I do want to be able to see inside from afar, and I'm not going to be saying or doing anything private inside the house, then maybe I bridge those two networks or have some sort of a VPN, DMZ, something like that.
Yeah.
My other thought is just have two parallel systems. Have one that's outside that always has on, all the smartphone app stuff, and then one that's internal. And I haven't really decided. That's part of what right now I'm testing various different cameras because a lot of people aren't aware of the specifics, right? And it takes somebody to actually dig into these things. A very popular brand I keep seeing recommended is Hikvision. Hikvision is owned by the Chinese government. They specifically make this stuff with firmware so that they can backdoor into it, because the way that the Chinese government works for the Chinese citizen is very different from the expectation of privacy that we have here in the US. And so the concept that people are buying these cameras for $60, $70, $80 off of Amazon and putting them in their houses is terrifying to me. But before I go on the air and say something like that, I want to have another option available. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
Well, I do see comments from time to time if we bring up China or Russia, and they go your government's any different and that type of stuff. And there's some truth to what they're stating there. But there's an article, for instance, just today when you said, there's some privacy expectations that differ between governments, in that China now requires, apparently, or going to require when you get a new phone, that you have to turn on Face ID so that it sends the facial recognition biometrics back to the government. There are things like that so far, at least, even in the United States, aren't technically allowed. I'm sure some of that data gets taken in NSA's big sweep, but technically that's illegal. Whereas, the Chinese government says we're doing it. Yeah. So
yeah, I think a part of that is what's legal and not legal in the US. I think the other part of that is American companies, there is an expectation, whether or not it's actually honored in the United States. There's an expectation of privacy from consumers. There's an expectation of privacy and an onus on the companies that make the cameras. Whereas with Hikvision and the Chinese government specifically, the way their law system is set up, the way their government is set up, is for the government to be able to spy on the people. That's the way that if you're going to go into business in China, that's something that you accept as part of doing business in China. So it makes me more nervous. And then the other thing too is, you remember, keep in mind this too, right? If the NSA, which we can agree, is probably very concerned about leaking information out, and that they're using IP cameras, and the FBI is using IP cameras, and hospitals and clinics are using IP cameras, and it seems to me that there are brands out there, and I believe I've landed on a couple of them, that provide the kind of network security that you need to be able to trust that as long as it's not connected to the internet, this is a safe thing to do inside of your home. And obviously, I'll know more by the end of this week.
I can't wait. This is something,
but it's something I think it's useful to know, and I think it's useful to throw a Wireshark. IP cameras calling, and why are they calling them? I want to know those things.
Awesome.
So Zeb, tell us about your week, and before you get into it, just want to say happy birthday, Zeb.
Thank you very much indeed,
Zeb. It's your
birthday!
Yeah, we got to spend a little time on your birthday. Of course.
Congratulations on your trip around the sun, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we get to my age, we don't bother about birthdays because I stopped counting at 50. But if you want to get pedantic, I'm 50 years old and 132 months. You'll have to work out the maths. I'm just going to add 12 to 132 next year if people want to know how old I am.
There you go.
It's been a good week. We had a nice lunch today. We went out to a local sort of restaurant and had some good fun with my grandchildren as well. So yeah, it's been an enjoyable day. And then I get to sit with you guys and geek out. It's just marvelous.
I mean, what a birthday present to be able to hang out with us.
Exactly.
I know, it's fantastic. It's really enjoyable. So on to more serious matters. it was a very busy week work-wise, so I didn't get a lot of playing. But I'm going to blame Ryan on this one because I'm now obsessed with tweaking my CPU and memory.
Yeah.
And Ryan put me onto a program called Geekbench, and my previous best was from a single core, I got 4144, and on a multi-thread, I got 52611. So I've been looking at some websites on how to do these things, and thankfully Asus has a very simple motherboard. So I've been bumping them up bit by bit. So my single core has now gone from 4144 to 4462.
Nice.
And the multi-thread has gone from 52611 to 56181. So quite a big bump on the multi-thread. So what does all this mean? I have absolutely no idea, but it was fun doing it. And the machine is stable, so I'll probably turn it back down in a couple of weeks, because one of the things that I did read is if you really don't know what you're doing and you're pushing your hardware to the limits, I'm guessing you will slowly wear it out longer than if you put it on sane levels. But I'm guessing that would also only be true if it got really hot or, things were starting to go wrong.
I mean, this is an interesting topic you bring up, because a lot of people ask me to overclock or do overclock videos, and I don't do overclock videos. It's not that I don't overclock and water cool and all the cool and fancy things that us geeks with hardware like to do. It's that it's insanely taxing on systems if done incorrectly. It could break people's $1,000 equipment that they've spent, a year saving up for, and then they're like, "Oh, cool, this DOS Geek guy does it. Let me go try it." But I've been working on computers for, over 20 years now. So there's
Did you really just do the I'm the professional, don't try this at home?
I am the professional, and I do the don't try this at home, because there are so many videos out there where people are doing the stupidest things to get you.
Why not make videos and tell people why that's
because
dumb?
They don't listen. They think it's cool. They think it's neat. And delidding, for instance, is one of the fads that people love to do, which has got to be the worst thing that people do videos on out there, which is popping the lids off your CPU to expose the die directly and then applying cooling directly to the die itself. Except there are so many issues that can go wrong with delidding, including the fact that a lot of people have broke their very expensive processors because some of those lids are soldered on. And if you don't look up your specific CPU, you're ripping out the die along with that cap and things like that. So it's just, now, if you want to play with your motherboard settings like you're doing, Zeb, I tell people it's like a car. If you go and you put all the high-tuned equipment and turbos and things in your car, you're going to go faster and your parts are going to wear out faster. That's how it works. That's why race cars, they're replacing parts on them constantly to keep them on the road, because high performance, lots of heat build up. You're going to lose a little bit of life out of it. But a little tweaking here and there hurts nothing. And you can have fun with it. And the key is to keep your cooling in match with the overclocking that you're doing. So if you are using a stock cooler and then you're overclocking these numbers, then you're going to have a ton of heat being produced, and you're going to have no way to truly be able to dissipate it. If you have a higher end cooler, aftermarket cooler, and you're doing these tweaks, then you can keep it there for a long time, because you're essentially keeping it at a low temperature. But that's why I don't talk about doing that type of stuff a lot. But I think the way you're doing it is very safe. If you stick with your motherboard settings, do a little tweak, test it, see if it's stable, you can have some fun. And then, like you said, put it back to normal when you're done.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. That's why I don't talk about it much either, or even knowing how to do it.
There's no point in learning how to do it because, all those reasons.
Yes. Yeah, well, there's no point in not learning, but you have to know what the risk is, and nobody talks about the risk. The risk is you may lose your $500 CPU. Your CPU may not only last a year or two versus.
Okay, so you won't make videos about it. Would you ever come on the Ask Noah show and explain the dangers of overclocking if I asked you about it?
Sure, I would.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
We might have to do that.
Sounds good. So the rest of my week was really quite fun, because as everybody knows, there's a Steam sale going on at the moment, and I managed to bag Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, and had an online game with English Bob and Silent Robot, and it was so much fun barging them in, carefully passing them so that I could win the race. So all of my Caravan Conkers paid dividends as they were slowing down for the bends, and I thought, well, if I oof him over the cliff, it's going to take him hours to get back, so I'll win the race. So yeah, it was really good fun, and it's still on sale. So come and join us on a game of Hot Pursuit. It's a great laugh.
Yeah.
So are you saying here, for the record, Zeb, that you dominated EB and Silent Robot?
Not at all.
Oh, okay. I thought that's what you were saying.
I came in last more often than not because half
Oh.
the time I misjudged ramming them and then just hit the barrier myself.
Well done, man.
So, Ryan, what's new in your world?
So this week I have spent a lot of time with the family, being a holiday and finally having some days off. But I did get a chance to get a video out on my final kind of conclusive review on the Pinebook Pro. I've been amazed at the support for these videos out there. There's so much interest in this Pinebook. I'm actually seeing a lot of people commenting on the video that, based on their comments, I can tell are not individuals who have necessarily used Linux before or played with Linux heavily. So a lot of people just interested in the fact that they get this kind of hackable laptop for a very reasonable price and some of the cool things that you can do with it. So that's been fantastic to see. And I actually plan to hack away at this device a little bit, not overclock it, but there are some things that I think you could do. For instance, flipping the speakers around so they're front facing. Based on looking inside of the device itself, I think I can use basically a hot air workstation with a very tiny tip and be able to cut some holes into the top plastic cover, flip the speakers up so they're front facing, because there's no reason based on what I see that they're not, and have some better sound out of them, maybe even upgrade the speakers myself and things like that in videos coming up. So I'll be doing some hacks around with that device, because I won't feel bad if somebody breaks their $199 Pinebook Pro as much as their $1,000 Intel CPU.
Especially considering the Pinebook Pro, you can also just replace the guts later, and just there you go. So
exactly, yeah,
absolutely. But just let me say one thing, that you shouldn't be surprised, Ryan, because those videos are so well made, and your enthusiasm just jumps out at the screen at you. So even if somebody's not a geek, after watching your videos and all the stuff that you're doing, it's infectious. People want, I'll have some of that. Let's go and try it. It's great stuff.
Well, thank you, Zeb. Yeah, so I hope it introduces a lot of new people to Linux, and it sounds like it is. And the Pine team is insanely supportive. You know, I bought this out of my own money, went and got this Pinebook Pro. I've said some things about issues that I have with the device in all of my videos, things that are good, the bad, the ugly, but they're out there retweeting it, talking about it on their forums, messaging me about the issues I'm coming across, saying, hey, we got a fix coming for this. Like, they've been really, really supportive and involved with the community, which is what we expect from Pine 64 and what exactly you're getting from them, which has been awesome as well. And then lastly, I did another repair for Dark One. He has sent another laptop that had a shattered screen in it, a very strange form-factored screen, and he got the laptop for nothing and is like, hey, I'll just send this to Ryan and make him fix it. Which I did, so that's been repaired. But what's interesting is it was another Windows machine. So I'm just putting this out there on the show that Dark One Linux and Tech News should be Dark One Windows and Tech News going forward. Just a thought there.
I hope you sent them back with Linux on, though.
Of course. That's the one cost of the repair, that Linux comes on it next. So, Michael, how's your week been?
My week's been pretty good. I actually had a little bit of a scare this morning because my power was out. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to on the show. And then all of a sudden, like an hour before, it came back on. So that we got lucky on that. I've actually been doing quite a bit, and I wanted to talk about it in the sense that I've been doing some forum integration with the websites for various different podcasts and stuff. So now when you go to the forums, you can actually reply to threads that were created on the websites for the individual podcast. So if there's an episode, when Destination Linux next episode comes out, when you reply on the forum for that thread, it will automatically show up as replies on the post on the website. So I've done a lot of integration there, and it's really cool stuff. But I think the biggest thing so far this week I did for the show is the DL picks, because we've been doing this software spotlights and tips and tricks for at least a few months or so. And, well, a lot longer than that. But we wanted to kind of create a database of all of it, and so people can go search for it and see what all the picks we've covered. And, also as a good reference point for us to not duplicate previous picks. There's a little extra bonus there.
This is huge. And honestly, one of the most requested things that we haven't had a chance to get around to. And so, people really enjoy the software picks, and we get a lot of people asking, how was that spelled again in the comments? What was the software they were talking about? And we put it in the show notes, but it's not convenient as having one place to see everything we've ever covered.
Well, it's also there's times where they might not know which episode what that they remember. Like
Right.
they remember a certain application, but they don't remember what episode it was in to get the link and everything. Now you can just go to destinationlinux.org/picks, and everything is in that page.
That's awesome.
This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, load balancers, integrated firewalls, and so much more. You can get access to this, plus their world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month. Or you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. That's darn near free. DigitalOcean also has over 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials to help you stay up to date with the latest open-source software, languages, and frameworks. You can get started on DigitalOcean for free with a $50 credit for 1 month by going to do.co/DL. Again, you can get started on DigitalOcean with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. And we thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode, as well as providing great services that we utilize for all sorts of things, including the forum that I mentioned earlier.
What about the website that I just redid on DigitalOcean? And to you who has been nagging me since I moved to NeoCities to please make a good website for once, I finally migrated to DigitalOcean, my website back from NeoCities, and put the typical stuff in there, got it all set up. It was quick, it was easy. It was the one-click install for a WordPress Ubuntu server site up and running in like 15 minutes. Some basic security plugins, and boom, you're ready to go. It was super simple, and now my site is better. But Michael said, please give me admin access so I can fix the design. So I can't win either way, but DL sure made it easy for me to transition my site to digital.
Yes, it works great. It just needs to look a little better.
Jerk.
So moving on to the community feedback, we have Alex send in a message, and he says, Dear Destination Linux podcast team, first I wanted to thank you for your engagement in the community and great resources that you're creating, not only DL, but every show in the network, especially for me who just recently switched to Linux, I think about a month ago, and I found out about this podcast and the Linux community in general. You present very complex material in a straightforward manner so that everyone can understand and enjoy it. Thank you for that feedback. He says, I'm running ZorinOS, and on an old MacBook Pro I had lying around, and it works really well. There are also plans to switch my main machine to Linux until as soon around Christmas time. Also, I'm still using Google services, as you can see, but I would like to get to a point so that I don't have to rely on those anymore or any of the big companies. I just haven't completely figured that out yet. So if any advice would be appreciated.
Google and questions is like Michael and KDE. Where you go, Ryan?
Yeah, this is my sweet spot, right? I actually.
But are you saying that I'm a big fan of KDE? Are you saying Ryan's a big fan of Google? Is that what you're implying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. So much so that on the front page of my new website, now hosted on DigitalOcean, there is a link to de-Googlify your life in there, in which I provide a list of alternatives and email services like Proton Mail, Tutanota, which I always slaughter their name, but however you say that one, as an option. Browsers, of course, you should be on Firefox. Password managers, search engines you should use, DNS servers, alternatives to YouTube, such as BitChute and PeerTube, Android alternatives, and other privacy things you should be doing. So if you check out DOSGeekCommunity.com, you'll see a link right there on the front page to de-Googlify your life. And you'll see lots of recommendations there, because I'm so happy that seeing so many people now starting to realize that these Google services, Amazon services, and things like this are just privacy invading garbage. And it's so welcoming to see someone send an email like this that's newer to Linux. They're switching their MacBook over to Linux. Then they're looking at taking the next steps and getting rid of these Google services that everybody's been so reliant on. And, it makes sense. We were so reliant on it. In a lot of ways, it's become part of our language, right? Even Noah and me were talking about a couple episodes ago about just saying, oh, go Google this. It's just part of your speech. Mm-hmm. It's just become a part of a lot of our lives, because these services, that company seemed to be such an amazing kind of a company when it first came out. I wrote my college thesis on Google's way of managing people that was so different than anything we had seen. And since that time, of course, they've turned into every other corporation out there that we've despised. So
I don't know if that's quite fair. That might be a bit.
I don't
stretch.
think so. I think
Okay,
it's.
He's right.
I
They
think
have
they're
they have
one of the
innovated
worst.
new ways to dislike them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's true for sure. But I'm just saying, like, as far as like the people who work at Google, like you and I know them, we meet with them, like to a certain degree, there is still a very forward-thinking momentum of like work when you want to work, keep the hours you want to keep, use the technology you want to use, set up your workstation the way you want. Like there are like I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like yes, Google is a horrendous company that terrifies me. They still have some good ideas, and we still should appreciate them for their
As
innovative
always, when we talk about companies, the people are good. I have friends that work at Google today, but I can tell you that
and the workflows.
they have mentioned that their entire. So I've been in corporate America most of my life. I started at 17 working for a big corporation. So I've grown up in this world, and most of the things that I would complain about in a very stereotypical company were not happening at Google when it first launched. They were doing these employee lunches that were extravagant. They had this work on anything you want project for 20% of your time during the week. You could work in any area of the business within reason that you wanted. They had a forum that you could go and talk where every employee and the executives were sitting there discussing things with each other. They had all kinds of cool ideas. All of that's gone out the window recently. Now people are scared to put things on the forum. Now there's the same retribution type things that you see in normal corporations. The benefits are going away. So the company has done a complete left turn from where it was headed. And until they change leadership out completely, you can see almost weekly now, their employees are literally leaving the building and protesting the company's involvement in various military applications or Chinese government deals and partnerships that they're doing. And it's turned into a mess. But you're right. They started out right. And those concepts they had were correct. That's what helped them grow. But they just have clearly left them behind.
Yeah, especially
I can see that.
They've changed so much of themselves. Like even their fundamental like motto of "Don't be evil." They even changed that, which implies are they trying to be evil now? I don't know. Like why would they?
Why would you ever get rid of that?
Yeah,
right?
like that just like such a like even if they didn't mean to make a statement on that, it makes a statement by getting rid of it, and it's like okay.
But if I could just bring it back to the email, what I really like about this is I'm thinking if Alex hadn't found Linux and hadn't found Destination Linux and listened to us talking about other things, would he still be oblivious, sitting there on Windows using all these Google products and not really aware of what's happening out there? That's what I find really good about this. He's found Linux, he's found the way, and he can now see a different light at the end of the tunnel instead of the Google light.
Yeah, and that's definitely awesome. I mean, because there's a lot of people who aren't aware of Google's history and their current structure. So I think this is a fantastic example that if you, as long as you are putting out the information to try to provide as much accurate information as you can, it can get to people, and that's awesome.
Yep.
Nomad writes in and says, I know Noah has been a supporter of private internet access for a long time. It was based on his recommendation that I started using them a couple of years ago. It was recently announced that private internet access was in negotiations to be purchased by Cape Technologies early next year. Cape was formerly known as Crosswriter, a company known to bundle adware with their products. Here's a link to the article on the name change. In it, the CEO says it was due to the association with past activities of the company. If the acquisition goes through and Cape plans to assume the name of private internet access as well, I'd like to know what your guys' thoughts on this are and whether Noah specifically or any of the other guys who might use private internet access are considering switching providers, and if so, where? I actually covered this question. This is kind of a cop-out, but the truth is I covered this question in-depthly on my show last week on Ask Noah. So if you want the in-depth answer, then I recommend you go over to podcast.asknoahshow.com and check out the latest episode, because I spent literally an hour explaining VPN technologies, what the different VPN technologies are, what some of the other alternatives are on the market, and what considerations you might care about as you go through them. But the short version is, if you're looking for alternative VPNs, there is Proton VPN, which has a free version, or they have a paid version that starts at $4 per month, and you can go as high as the $24 per month. There's Bullvad, which is essentially what I would consider to be the community replacement for PIA, in that what people were so excited about PIA 5-6 years ago Mullvad is the company that they're excited about now. It's €5 per month or $5.50 per month, and you can pay as you go rather than committing to any long-term thing. You can, of course, pay with Bitcoins and all those kinds of things. And then, of course, there are a number of different ways to set something like this up yourself using various different virtual servers and different VPN technologies. And so what kind of VPN technology you want to rely on, what you're expecting out of your VPN technology. Are you wanting to have just a way to kind of secure your traffic when you're in a public Wi-Fi, or is like everything you Google on the internet you don't want to be attributed back to you? What are you looking for? And depending on what you're looking for and what your requirements are, the answer changes. But as far as private internet access of itself is concerning, absolutely. Have I canceled my membership or anything like that? No. I want to see what this company does with PIA. It's entirely possible that this company looked up and went, listen, there is a lot of money to be made in protecting people's privacy. Private internet access is doing that. We made money by exploiting people's privacy. Now that seems like we can make more money by protecting it. Let's make money by protecting it. I don't know that Cape Technology is a good or bad company. I trust that they're interested in profit. PIA is successful precisely because they have a track record of protecting users' privacy. Maybe that's all it is. So we don't know yet is the answer. But if you want alternatives, they're certainly out there. And I have a complete rundown, an hour-long rundown at podcast.asknoahshow.com/155.
Now, I know it's a very simplistic thing to say, but we had Christelle back on the show from Private Internet Access. And I honestly believe that if she felt there was anything nefarious that was going to happen, she would leave and let us know. So I'm going to keep a very close ear to the ground as to what Christelle is letting out, the words she's using, how she's saying things, and I'm not going to change until, like Noah, we get that. And it might be like, oh, yeah, you silly boy, it's too late now, you've given them all the information. But I want to wait and see and give them a chance yet, because at the moment, it's just a name change by the higher-up corporation. The people who still work for PIA are there in places of influence. Let's see if they get their minds changed by corporate America coming in.
And I think that's the key.
Agree more with that.
We see a massive exodus of some of the employees at the higher ups at PIA during this acquisition, which generally happens between 6 and 12 months after an acquisition takes place. That would be a sign that something could be really awry, and to pay more attention. Right now, I don't think anything's going to change at the moment that we see, but you're right. I think we would have enough communication outlets that if we hear something, we'll let everybody know.
So Zeb, you made a good point that I didn't think about, like having a sign of, like the Exodus would be a good sign to say that it's going to be an issue. But it does make me kind of worried about it's a weird situation, because if PIA was purchasing something, there'd be no argument. Like we'd be like, yeah, of course they're the ones in control still, but they're being purchased by someone else. And the people who are in control could make changes in the back end that we have no idea until it's too late. But we don't know for sure. But like if this company had already proven itself, let's say like Proton had purchased them, there'd be no issue. It's just the fact that this company that has purchased them, we know for a fact used to include adware in their products when they were known as Crossrider, and then they switched to a new name to kind of differentiate themselves from the previous actions of Crossrider. And I think there's been reports about them, like the people who are in control of the Cape company now are different from the people in control of the Crossrider, but it still just kind of creates this weird limbo phase.
It's worth watching.
Yeah, we don't know exactly. So I would say that it's not worth saying that there's anything to worry about right now, but it also is something that we should just keep an eye on it, essentially. So I don't know. It's a weird situation to deal with, because it's just all up in the air right now, and I guess we'll see. I don't think I'll be changing it all. Maybe I'll add an extra VPN or something, but I don't.
I'm going to be checking out Mullvad. That seems interesting to me.
Yeah.
So we love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send us a short email or a video that may get incorporated into the show. And you can see that we do pick our emails quite specifically to encourage that engagement with the rest of the community and to develop a conversation. So keep them coming, because we really do enjoy using them in the show. So, on to some distro news, and ZorinOS apparently has some privacy concerns. ZorinOS has received a lot of positive publicity lately on its latest release of its distribution. However, with popularity comes controversy. This time, the controversy is a privacy concern noted by some users on Reddit. Users started reporting that they were seeing anonymous pings sending an anonymous unique identifier of your computer every 60 minutes without any user consent. Now, Zorin has responded to the controversy, stating that the data is an anonymous unique identifier, but that it does not log IP addresses, and it's only used to determine unique users of the OS. They go on further to explain it generates a random series of letters and numbers which can be found in varlib ZorinOS census UUID. In addition to discussing how seriously they take privacy, Zorin included the script and screenshots of the database and what it collects. And then the article goes on to mention that comparing this to Ubuntu, RTM Zorin mentions that Ubuntu comes pre-installed with popularity contest, which sends data of what packages the user has installed to developers. And Zorin doesn't include that in their install. Now, Ryan, I think you've heard back from Martin Wimpress of Ubuntu that maybe counteracts that.
Yeah, so I reached out to Martin because, I had some ideas that what was being stated in this article was wrong, but who would know better than Martin himself? So Martin clarified that Popularity Contest is installed by default, as it has been in Debian for many years. However, Popularity Contest has been disabled by default also for many years, and that they do, because in the article they also mentioned something about Ubuntu may or may not collect IP addresses. The answer is no, they do not log IP addresses via Ubuntu report either within their data. So, some of these articles, it took me all of 5 minutes to reach out to Martin and say, hey, is this the case or not? And we got an answer. And I feel like people writing articles like this, it kind of creates an unnecessary privacy reaction of ooh, look what Ubuntu's doing. Ubuntu's doing the same thing. They may or may not be logging your IP address. Why not ask one of the developers? It takes 5 minutes, or even
Absolutely.
community or something.
Yeah.
But for me, this brings a more interesting question that, okay, so Zorin is out there and they're trying to collect information on the number of users they have whilst maintaining its anonymity. So no doubt there are people who can go out and check that. Is there anything wrong with that? What's wrong with trying to collect information about the users that you can have, or the users you have, the type of hardware they're using, if it can help you improve Linux?
There is one thing wrong with it. Most distros don't do it. I think every distro should do it, because it is a situation where we don't have any idea how many people actually use Linux, and we haven't for decades, purely because people just don't ask and don't have a situation for this. This is essentially a machine ID, and this ID is associated to an individual machine, and then it sends back the data. I think the weird thing is that it's 60 minutes. Like, I don't think that's necessary to do it every hour. That's odd. But like
once a week.
Yeah, once a day at the most is probably fine. But like you could do it. You could say like this has already been sent, so only update it once a week just in case. Like that you could be doing that to see how often, if they try to distro hop off of your system. I could see why they would want to do that. But once an hour seems excessive. But
good luck on date then.
But the idea of just taking a machine ID is not a big deal. There's actually other distros that do it as well. In fact, KDE Neon also has a machine ID system where it sends a unique identifier for that system, and it's completely anonymous in that way. And like none of them take the IP address. None of them have actual like identifiable information. Even the Ubuntu stuff, where the original thing they were talking about is they were kind of conflating the Ubuntu -report system with the popularity contest, because the popularity contest is from Debian, and it's also disabled by default in Debian, because it's the idea like you manually volunteer the information, and except at the same time that most people don't even know that popularity contest or PopCon is even a package in Debian. So most people don't do it because they're not told that it exists. So it's not even, there's not much value in that because people aren't aware. I think that it's a good idea for people to have, or for distros to create a machine ID. And I think it's important to know how many people are using your system and how many people are using your distro.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying there, but I don't think anything Zorin was doing here was nefarious in any way. They weren't trying to get one over on people, but I think this is a great lesson for, Ubuntu hasn't always had the best communication when it came to the 32-bit situation, for instance. But one thing they did really well when they were going to gather additional data that you had the choice to opt out of during the install was they did this big announcement about they were doing it. They told you exactly the information they were going to get. Then they created a web page on top of that to post all of the information they're collecting so you could see it and everybody could use it. And they just had a really solid communication plan. When you're dealing with people in the Linux community, you have to realize that we are, as a whole, a much more educated computer user that is very interested in privacy and security. In fact, I would say that's in the top 2 reasons people switch to Linux is privacy and security.
I agree.
So if you are going to have an operating system and you are going to do any type of data collection, you have the responsibility to be extremely clear on this is what we do, here is how we do it, and everybody knows when you install it, and you provide an opt-out option. And in this case, their excuse for saying, well, we didn't get around to the opt-out feature in this release cycle seems a little odd to me. Yeah, it doesn't quite fly. To me, it seems like, hey, it's not a big deal. Everybody else is doing it. And then, we couldn't get it to it in the release cycle for the opt-out, so we're going to add it in later. Again, do I think it's negative intention? No, I just think it's a big oversight, and I hope Zorin learns from it in the future to say, hey, we're dealing with a community that is very much on top of their privacy and security, and we need to do a much better job, with being transparent in what we're doing so that stuff like this doesn't get blown out of proportion.
I agree completely.
Now, I know we're showing a little bit of cynicism here about we thought, well, maybe they think we won't bother and let's see if we get caught. But again, having interviewed RTM on our Destination Linux, I think it was a genuine mistake because he seemed very switched on, very clued as to what the community wants. But then this also then brings up the very big question, do you have to opt out because you're automatically opted in, or do you have to opt in because you're automatically opted out? I prefer the you're already opted in method, because that way those people who just go next, don't care. So what does it matter that you've got their information and you're counting numbers? Whereas those people who would really care will read that and opt out. So I think, automatically opted in is a better solution.
I think there's people who argue that it's, the privacy oriented people who are like zealots, I guess, in the privacy side of saying that having it opted in is a negative because it assumes compliance. And I think that's a bad argument, because opted in is a good way of doing it, mainly because if someone doesn't care and they just don't care enough to opt in, if you have them automatically opt out by default, then they might not opt in and you won't even have any idea at all. If they are opted in automatically and you say you also get the information about when they opt out, then you know that they chose not to. So you get more data in that sense too.
Yeah,
so that's
and like Ubuntu, create a very clear screen where it says it. And if people don't read, they're probably not reading any terms and agreements of anything anyways, and just accepting stuff all over the place. But you have to make it a clear screen, clear indication. This is the option. Don't want to hide it, in some box at the very bottom that nobody reads with tiny text. You just need to be very upfront with it. I think Zorin can learn from this, and I'm sure they will improve upon it in their next releases.
Yes, I agree. And I also think that it's a great point about Artyom that that we've had conversations with him when we know that they wouldn't do this stuff maliciously, and it just seems like an oversight thing. However, I would also point out that if you're going to compare what you're doing with someone else, make sure you're fully informed on the thing that you're comparing it to. Because in this case, they were not. So, yeah.
One thing that does dawn on me is I agree, Ryan, like 100% that the vast majority of people that come to Linux are coming because of security and or privacy and or because they just want something different. But one of the things that I feel like requires cutting a little bit of slack is when you have a distro that has a very specific purpose like ZorinOS does. ZorinOS is specifically designed to be a soft landing place for Windows users. And so to that end, like I understand if I would understand more if a privacy focused distro like Tails had some sort of reporting feature, and like it would be totally appropriate to take them to task on that. But when you start talking about your focus is a soft landing spot for Windows users, like it's not inconceivable that mistakes happen. It's not inconceivable that inadvertent decisions are made, and sometimes we just have to be a little bit patient with smaller niche distros that are trying to accomplish one very specific task. Is that me making an excuse, or is there some legitimacy?
No, you're not wrong. And I don't think this is a bash on Zorin situation either here. And I think companies wanting to understand who's using their product is fair. But you also have to, if you're in a business, and Zorin sells this, right? They sell their operating system. They have it for free as well, but they sell versions of this. They're trying to make a company out of this, which is fine. And I'm very happy with them. And I think a lot of people love their product for a good reason. It's a good product. But when you have to know your customers, and for instance, like you said, a lot of people are coming from Windows. They hear Windows collects metadata on them. And if you go out there and do general searches, which I actually did this week on what metadata Windows grabs, a lot of articles just state your IP address, machine information. They don't go into all of the details. So then now this new Windows user sees these articles start popping up and sees people reacting to it negatively and goes, well, I've just switched from Windows to get away from metadata to Zorin to now have my metadata because Zorin didn't make it clear enough, and that allowed. So it's a mistake, but I think the responsibility is for Zorin to just fix it. It's not what people are making it out to be. It's not the way this article shifted it to be. That's not what they were trying to do. But because they weren't as upfront as, say, Ubuntu was when they did this, it creates this negative cycle, and it's going to create that negative cycle potentially with a lot of new people going, well, I just switched from one metadata grabbing operating system to another, when that's far from the case. But people who don't really understand the specifics could get lost in that.
So another thing I wanted to say is that I agree what you're saying, Ryan, and I also want to point out there's something that Zorin has done. Like, they need to be more transparent about it. And also, don't rely on a third-party article, website, or news site or whatever to convey the message or what you want to be saying. Like, if you go to their blog site, they don't have an article about this happening. You need to be upfront on your own platform and express what you're doing and why you're doing it and that kind of thing. And that way, people could have, be fully informed. And as a secondary point to that, you're saying you couldn't get into this release. Well, your releases are not, as far as I know, your releases are not like, required deadline structured. You could just set it back a couple weeks or so to put that solution in there. And I think there'd be no issue whatsoever. I think that's what, well, actually, no, if you don't tell people about it as well, there'd still be an issue. But like, it'd be less of an issue if you gave them the option and take a little bit more time to make sure you could. So overall, I think there's not that much of a privacy concern for Zorin. And I think people are overreacting, but at the same time, there are things that they can improve on.
Ubuntu Touch runs on the Raspberry Pi. Ubuntu Touch is making its way across the plethora of current devices and upcoming phones like the Pi phone, the Volla. So why not make it run on the Raspberry Pi with the touchscreen LCD? Well, that's exactly what's being done. And the UBports team has been testing out Ubuntu Touch on the Pi 7-inch touchscreen LCD.
Yes.
Now, this means that Ubuntu Touch gets a true development platform for the future. And if you're already using Ubuntu Touch, then you also have something to look forward to in the upcoming OTA, in the upcoming over-the-air update, including better support for Bluetooth headsets, mirror display server that can run on Wayland, and that will allow the user to suspend the session and save you battery. Now, Ubuntu Touch is heating up and is well-deserved, and they have an incredible crew of developers, and the OS keeps getting better with every release. My question to you is this. Who is the user that is sitting down in front of their machine and they're going, I have this Raspberry Pi, I need an operating system for, I don't want to put Ubuntu Mate, I want a mobile operating system that isn't quite on par with Android or iOS yet. That's that's the part that has always confused me, to the point that every time Dalton Durst comes on to Ask Noah and I ask him that question, like, who is the primary user? Who are we targeting? Who are the people that are signing up to do these things? Like, it's become a joke. Like, I continually ask that question, but I'm still looking for the answer. What problem is this solving? What user base is this fulfilling?
So to me, the way I understood this is this creates a standardized platform for them to continue to build Ubuntu Touch off of. So everything in the mobile world is, well, not everything, but a lot of things in the mobile world are ARM based. You have this very stable setup with the Raspberry Pi 4, in which you could tell anybody who's interested in helping out and developing for this tool, you want to help us with Ubuntu Touch? No problem. Get a Raspberry Pi, install this OS on it, has the touch screen, has everything that a mobile phone would have, and you can go in there and start developing and building things like applications and other stuff for it right from a standardized piece of equipment that anybody can go grab. This is much different than telling people go buy that 7-year-old phone off of eBay for $25, hope that it's the same, still runs the same or has the same hardware in it, right, that the phone in the US has and versus the one in the UK has, and all of this type of stuff. So it just creates a standardized platform for them.
Okay, so just playing devil's advocate for a moment. So the standardized platform is a desktop replacement all-in-one PC designed for learning? I mean, does that not seem like a strange platform to standardize a mobile operating system on?
I don't think so, because they have to pick something out there. They don't have a phone created for just their operating system. So they have to create something they're going to standardize that is accessible to anybody who wants to become a developer and help out with this project. And I actually think it's a really cool idea because of the fact that you've got a $35 system that anybody, for the most part, could afford. And if you found a really good developer that couldn't afford it, you could afford to just send them one versus going and grabbing a $150, $200 phone for every single person who wants to be a developer and build off of it. Now, there's going to be some differences, obviously, in there, but I think this would allow you to build off of the Ubuntu platform in a very cost-effective way.
So it's $35 for the motherboard, but then you got to add a touch screen display, and then you have to have a mobile battery pack so that you can power this thing, and then you need to have a case that fits all of those things.
You don't have to have a case that fits all that.
So you're just going to carry the little
Pi
around?
I have an LCD screen that's separated. It has its own stand that you just plug the Raspberry Pi into.
Yeah, but okay. But again, like, what are you doing with this? So
developing stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right,
case,
great.
I run Pi-hole off of it.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, it's fine for like developing apps, again, for the mysterious user. But again, we don't have a thing that I can go take to a person and say, here's a thing that you can run Ubuntu Touch. Like that, this doesn't fill that niche, right? Yeah, it's one more place that people can develop apps. But let's be honest, if my understanding of the way that Ubuntu Touch and UBports is developed, anything that's developed in Qt could run on it, right? So it's not like we didn't previously. It's not like you couldn't do it on a desktop before, and now that we can do it on a Pi, you can. Right?
And now you're just putting vinegar in their cereal.
Oh, sorry.
And they were eating good cereal. It was Captain Crunch, my favorite cereal, and then you just took a bunch of white vinegar and poured
just dumped it right in there. That's terrible. You know what? I think this is a great idea. I apologize.
Well, I mean, even let's just like, you're right that vinegar is not very tasty, but let's say that if you take, I think the audience for Ubuntu Touch, as far as on the phones go, is absolutely the people who care about the privacy and care about security, and are fully aware that neither option, Google or Apple, are good options. Like,
agree with you 100% so far.
So I think that we need a phone that has a more easy, accessible way to do it, rather than going to get really old phones. And I think that's what the Pine phone is. And I think that it will be, hopefully. Not right now, it isn't, but it will be, hopefully. But the Raspberry Pi provides a way for someone to become a developer on it who doesn't have those phones and isn't able to, and wants to get involved right now and isn't able to get one of the phones that are supported. I think that that's a good idea overall, and it also, in addition to that, makes it possible for them to work on the Unity 8 aspect of Ubuntu Touch, because it's not just the mobile aspect that they're doing. They're also building the DE for Unity 8, which is a Qt-based DE for the desktop. So they have there's multiple values of using the Pi, because it has the ubiquitous nature of the Pi, as well as having the option to work on the mobile version, work on the desktop version, make apps for the things, like that kind of thing.
To Noah's point, though, I think the Pine Phone makes more sense, right? If Pine Phone, when it releases,
Right,
come out and say, this is our now standard equipment that we're going to use that everybody develops on, that makes more sense.
Yes.
But it's not out yet. And there really is nothing out right now that would run Ubuntu Touch to develop on natively outside of what we're waiting for with the Pine Phone. And I think a Raspberry Pi it's cool. It's kind of an interim solution. And I think they could get some good work potentially done off of it from developers who typically may not contribute to that project. But the one thing I'm the most happy, regardless if it works on Raspberry Pi or it becomes the Pine Phone, is that Ubuntu Touch is getting so much popularity because it's deserved it. They've done a fantastic job on this operating system. It needs more developers and more people involved in it if we ever want it to become this big thing. But even including the Volaphone and things we talked about last week, are planning to have Ubuntu Touch. It's a name that people recognize out there as a free and open source operating system alternative, that when you release a phone, people are going to ask immediately, does it support Ubuntu Touch? And that's a really good sign for them. And I think hopefully more people will get involved in that project. The people they have are ridiculously talented already, because it's, I think, one of the most exciting mobile operating systems out.
Agreed.
So also in the news regarding mobile OS phones and devices for Linux is the privacy-based Libram 5 device has finally shipping to end users this time. As some may recall, the first batch only made it into the hands of those that worked for the company, which was a sudden change of direction because originally they made it out like people who signed up for that batch were going to get it, but they had only, it seems, sent it to internal folks. But this next Birch batch is actually getting into the hand of end users. And we're starting to see some posts finally from those end users who are receiving their device. Some have taken to Reddit, for instance, to post pictures and answer questions that people have about the device. But a couple of those posts that I stumbled upon, unfortunately, the negativity has been so harsh that they've completely abandoned their IMAs there and said, I'm not answering any more questions, or asked for the mods to shut it down. So there's a lot of negativity around this device based on suspicions that, people are saying, oh, you must work for the company if anybody says anything nice about the device, or just in general disliking the direction of how Purism has handled this entire launch. So looking at from the pictures of the device and what I could gather in some of the videos, the device does look like it's much better quality than what some were anticipating. If you remember, they had put in their post something about, buttons not quite fitting right, the case not fitting right, that type of stuff. And I didn't see anything there, at least in the pictures, that would lead me to believe the device was incomplete. Some of the issues, however, that people are reporting include inability to hear audio on calls. So you can't make calls on it yet. Voice over LTE and Wi-Fi calling do not work. Fast battery discharge, can't access either camera or utilize Bluetooth, and you're not able to set the network mode.
Oh.
So,
and we're in 2019, and Android and iOS have about 15 years on us.
So, of course, you can expect some issues to happen when you have an early adopter device, and there is some level of room that, for instance, even in my Pinebook Pro video, when that device launched, there's some give that you say it's a $199 device. I expect there's some things that may not be perfect. In this case, though, some of the basic features not working that you would expect from a phone, and I mean basic features
like a phone,
being able to make a call, not working is a little odd at the least, especially when you have a $699 asking price on top of that. Now, most of these things will likely be fixed in the software at some point. Obviously,
that's good
because the calls can connect. You just can't hear anybody. It has the ability to make calls. Some of the positive stuff to try to keep this positive, and then I'll let Noah loose, is the screen is bright and good quality. Right? People are reporting the screen looks great. It boots in under 10 seconds. Noah. It comes with a very nice handwritten note thanking the purchaser. And
I'm sorry.
Well, that will make me feel better, as I'm not making my phone calls on my new $700 smartphone. I have a handwritten note.
And the SIM from T-Mobile has been tested and it does work. So SIM cards from the US carriers are working, and that's great. And
how do they know it's working if they can't make calls?
well, it connects to the call, but then it downgrades you down to 3G. So it's connecting through the 3G connection, but you can't hear anything, but you know that you've connected.
It initiates calls, but it doesn't actually.
Does it do video calls?
Sounds great.
The cameras no, the cameras don't work.
So you can't FaceTime or anything like that, you know. But the Purism hasn't had the smoothest of launches, we know. Okay, but
What you don't say.
But their intention to sell a privacy-focused device is welcome, right? I mean, I'm very happy there's a company out there trying to create a device that's privacy-focused. It just seems like, as we've said before, they bit off more than they could chew.
Yes.
All right, go Noah.
Okay, so where to start with the phone that doesn't work as a phone?
Probably there.
I commend their effort. I do. I think it's a great idea. I think that a privacy-focused phone is great. I think that you should focus on making a phone that works if you're going to make a privacy-focused... I just want to reframe this discussion a little bit. So here's what we're starting with. Android and iOS kind of rule the world as far as the mobile market goes. That's just the world that we're in. So if you want to sell a successful product, that's your competition. Whether you like it or not, that's your competition. People that care about privacy and happen to be using an Android phone or an iOS, that's your starting point. So from there, here are your choices. You can, take a version of Android and modify it heavily to lock it down, which people are doing, and there are all sorts of Android derivatives that do that. Now, understand that they are using the same drivers to operate the radios and stuff like that as Android, so they're not having to re-engineer from the ground up. But the trade-off is the phone works and it can connect to LTE, something that anybody purchasing a phone, it's going to be like checkbox number 1 on the box is, does the phone power on and connect to a network, and can I use that? That's the advantage in going that route, in just modifying a version of Android. So what Libram is trying to do, to the best of my understanding, is kind of do this from the ground up if we were kind of do everything. And while that's commendable and respectable, Apple buys up Gorilla Glass like no tomorrow. There's never going. It's a far feat to think that you're going to build a phone from scratch. So now you're left with: can you buy pre-existing shells, or can you cobble something together, or can you flash your operating system onto something? And so then the question becomes: is that operating system a better user experience and more privacy focused than the alternatives? And here's what I'm hearing. Sailfish OS, by the way, works flawlessly right out of the box. You just install it, it just works. It's running on Lix. It's running with Lux encryption. It has an app ecosystem. It does connect to the internet. All the radios work. The phone works. The dialer works. It may not be a privacy-focused OS, but it's certainly an operating system that is built by people that aren't Google and have things like privacy on their mind, even if that's not the focus of the operating system. So I'm not saying it's not a good effort, and I'm not saying I'm not glad that they have the success that they do, and I'm always glad for competition in the market space. I'm just saying there are 755 better alternatives to a privacy-focused phone than what I'm hearing about.
Well,
Libra.
people will argue that, Purism has taken on, of course, the operating system and the hardware, but specifically they'll argue with you on the hardware that the reason why Purism is more costly is the fact that they have created independent modules and kill switches and things within this device to make it more privacy focused. And the people who are getting this device are under the impression that this is very much a launch device, meaning you are part of the testing as a part of getting this device. And so you should expect to have issues like this. Now, I don't agree with that. I'm just telling you what people are going to argue back, that it's far different than going and getting an Android device with their closed source Bluetooth drivers, their closed source Wi-Fi, their closed source.
They work, but I mean, they're closed source.
Yes, and therefore that's why this device, is more costly, why it's so thick, and why there's so many.
I'm going to go from trying to be nice and
that was your nice
logic. That was nice. Here's not nice. You're doing more damage to the overall community by releasing this non-working piece of crap, then you are just not existing in the market. The reality is, the next time somebody comes up and says, we want to do, when a System 76, for example, comes along and says, we want to do a privacy-focused phone, somebody who actually has a track record of introducing products that work, that value privacy, if they were to come along and say that we're going to do this, all of a sudden, everybody is tainted. That's just another Android knockoff thing, somebody trying to whatever. It actually does, we do real harm here. And I think, and I mean, and we're not even going to talk about their past indiscretions with their choice of ads, right? It's just to release a product like this in this state and try to call this success. I've been saying since April or March, when they came out and they're like, we're going to ship a phone. I'm like, you're not going to ship a phone. You're not going to ship a phone. And if this is your excuse for shipping a phone, you haven't shipped a phone. So I really, really, really want Todd and the Purism team to take a step back and say, okay, what can we do well? What problem in the community can we solve well? And I think there are plenty of privacy-focused problems and plenty of room for a company focused specifically on privacy. But you need to understand that audience. And that audience are not the kind of people that want a top-tier, beautiful, elegant lines, all of those things, fast-natured phone. They want something secure and private. And the kind of people that want smooth, sleek, silk, the whole 9 yards, they're fine taking a little bit of hit on their privacy, but they won't take any hit on usability. The first time I got into a car, and I won't say who it is or what was happening, but with an experimental operating system that the name is well known, and we got into a car, and we went to go somewhere, and he was using it as a daily driver, and I said, how do we get to blah, blah, blah? And he's like, I don't know, the GPS app doesn't work on this thing. I'm like, I'm not going back to 2005. Like, I'm not going back to 2005 with my Palm handspring visor Trio running Palm OS. I'm sorry. Like, I did too in 2005. I wouldn't want to use it today.
There you go.
I expect when I pull my phone out of my pocket, I need to be able to make phone calls. It's kind of a function of having a cell phone. I expect to be able to connect to LTE. I expect to be able to connect to Wi-Fi. I expect to be able to use some sort of navigation app. I expect to be able to send some sort of text message. But you'll be able to
do that at some point with this device, Noah. At some point.
I think
they keep saying that, don't they?
They should.
Meanwhile, as we keep waiting for that magical day to arrive, Apple and Android continue to advance their platform and actually begin to start to address some of these issues. Now, I'm not claiming that Android or iOS is some privacy-focused platform now, but in the latest version of Android, for example, a step in the right direction, I might point out, when an app tries to access the camera in the background or access the microphone in the background, I get a little pop-up. It's kind of ominous.
Hey, iOS has had that for 2 years. Welcome to
Right. No, but my point is they are starting to address that, right? Both Apple and Google are starting to say people kind of sort of care about this. Let's throw them a bone. And it's, does that security function? Is there any actual encryption or security or forcing mechanism to ensure that anything ever grabs the mic, that message pops up? Probably not. But it's a step in the right direction. And I guess my point is all it takes is Google or Apple to look over and be like, what are these people? Oh, they're doing that? Okay, all right. Do what they're doing and just implement that next release, okay? And that's not even like a major shift for these companies. It's just task 4 or 5 guys that are sitting on the develop thing say, hey, could you look into this whole privacy thing and see if it's something we can just knock out for them so that the people start complaining? Just make it a point release, right? I just really question if this is the best use of. You're taking people that are in the community and they're going to spend their money on these things and they're going to bring these back into their homes and then they're going to try to live their lives all of these things. And show of hands, how many people think that they're going to be they're going to have satisfactory results no matter what your expectations really are with this first generation essentially prototype? Like, I just really have a hard time with it.
Nobody raised their hands.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that we're doing more harm than good.
And I've got a question. So I've paid my $799 and I've now got my prototype phone. Mm-hmm. Will an update further down the line make my phone usable? Or is this a hardware?
Theoretically. No, this is, I think it will be.
Software, sure.
I think it's software based for sure.
Yeah.
But, I can't argue with anything you're saying, Noah. Honestly, this is, I know that they're trying to come across as this is a prototype. People signed up for this, but you can't prototype basic functionality not working and charge people $700 for the privilege to have a not working device. It's just, this wasn't ready. They're just trying to get it out there to prove everyone to say, look, we shipped something. something's out there. Good luck. And then now they're launching saying, hey, don't worry, we're going to have a new iteration in 2020 where a new version of this is going to come out. And I hope they get it right. But I think your advice to them is perfect. They really, as somebody who has led people for most of my career, there are times where you have to step back and ask yourself, what are we good at?
Yes.
And then you take that and then you push that forward with your team.
Play to your strengths.
They have to play to their strengths, and unfortunately, they've bit off more than they can chew, and it is shown. They can recover, they can fix this, and I will tell you, I will be the first one when they release something that is usable to celebrate this company and say thank you for doing this to the community, thank you for bringing this forward. You know, you've learned. Let's move on. But until that time,
imagine this. Imagine this. Imagine a device. Imagine a $250 phone that's privacy focused, secure by default, encrypted by default, and it doesn't even have LTE. The only thing it has is Wi-Fi. And so if you're going to get onto a network and you team up with Proton, and you go to them and you say, hey, we want to release this device. Here's what we want. And so the device, when you connect it to the network by default, just like Tails automatically connects to the Tails network, this automatically connects through Proton VPN and your internet connection, so you can feel safe browsing, secure by default. Maybe there is no front-facing camera and the back camera has a little physical thing that slides over it so it can open and close, and so you can prevent this camera from being accessed, even if you can't tightly control the software because you have to rely on some binary blobs to turn the camera on and off. And so you get some physical workarounds to get those kinds of things. And it's a privacy focused, essentially computer, not necessarily smartphone replacement, but computer. That is a product people would be interested, at least there is a market for that. There are people that are so interested in privacy that would trade with the convenience of being connected to the internet 24/7. And then you get people like me that I like my smartphone being connected 24/7, but golly gee, am I open to the idea of maybe we shouldn't have everything on the internet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe we should try to find ways to bring that data back more local. And if the time when I am connected to the internet, it's going through this VPN system by default and it's securing all my communications, now I can start to see where that product's, where the audience is and who would buy that kind of product and those kind of things. But man, when you are trying to go after Apple and this is your approach, I mean, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, I agree.
Not good.
It sounds like you're saying is maybe as NecoChat in the chat says, like a open source iPod Touch approach.
Yes, right, exactly. An open source iPod Touch style of a thing. I want a local piece of technology that I can purchase, and I own the thing, and I don't have to worry about it leaking my information or the photos I take on this device I'm going to carry with me. I don't want them leaked to iCloud. That's what I want. I want to go to my kid's birthday party and take pictures. I can get behind a device like that, but you don't need everything down to the microcode and the processor doesn't necessarily have to be open source for that model to work. You can get there without killing yourself, and the answer is focus on less and don't try to do everything the iPhone can do. Don't try to make an Android replacement. Just make a good, solid product on the market that people are interested in buying. And if you look at people that are interested in privacy, if you look at the Richard Stallmans of the world, they're not interested in an Android or iOS replacement. They're not interested in a Twitter client or a Instagram client for a third-party OS. They just want a device that they could fit in their pocket and do the same kind of things like navigation and get on Telegram and stuff like that all of their peers are doing with their devices they pull out of their pocket. They just want to do it in a more secure way.
And
I think if you approached it that way.
Pine 64, right? Because they came out and
perfect
said,
example.
Produce the hardware.
Yes.
You guys figure out the software.
Exactly.
But they got it into the hands of developers.
Perfect example.
Plenty of time.
So, and and then we start to see, and as much as I joke, right, we start to see where some of this stuff comes together, because now we start to see where UBports really starts to fit in. Here we have a hardware device that we need a secure enough operating system that we can own, and UBports is there to answer that equation. And I would say the same thing about my beloved Sailfish OS. It's an operating system specifically designed for people who want a Linux-based operating system that they can install themselves onto a piece of hardware commodity hardware that they purchase. I think something like the Pine, the Pine phone and UBports and or Sailfish OS fit perfectly. If Libram wanted to do something like that or make another physical device to compete with like the Libram or the Pine phone, that I could see. Yep. I just don't understand this.
It's taking on too big of a task that they can't handle. It's just
too fast.
Yeah, it's a biting off more than they can chew kind of thing.
We still don't have the laptop thing perfected yet.
Yeah.
And I don't want to eat our own but this you
No,
just
of course
have to
not.
call a spade, and that this was not a effective. This was not an effective product launch,
Yeah.
and
they also
second
they've been
there is a
promoting that
turn this
they
around. I will be very happy to support them and give them all the praise. I honestly would, because I like their mission.
We would like to be
They
wrong.
just have nothing to back it up right now, and that's the issue. And I hope they get there. I'll be the first to cheer for them when they do.
Yeah. I mean, we want to be wrong about this particular situation and when this particular company's track record and stuff. We want to be wrong about it, but they have to make us wrong about it.
How great would it be if the phone just takes off and like people buy it right and left and it, they put Google and Apple just out of business overnight? I mean, that would be great. I can't imagine anything better.
It would
we
be
would
great.
love a privacy-focused phone. And then once you get the user base, we all agree that all of these other problems are easy to solve. We all agree that the second it got mainstream adoption and people started using this phone, all of a sudden, people are going to say to themselves, hey, now there's a massive market. Now there's a bunch of people buying the phone. We've got all the money in the world to fix radios and sign contracts and all that other stuff. The problem is it's a chicken before the egg, and people like me don't see how you're ever going to get the egg starting with the chicken.
Yep.
So now moving on to some good news, or it could turn out to be good news. Linux-powered handhelds return. So some of you may recall the handheld pocket chip by Nexthing. It was a hackable, handheld, ARM-based device with a battery, keyboard, and removable microcomputer. The pocket chip was aimed at gamers and hackers, but didn't really take the market by storm, as it was fairly limited in its capabilities, and the keyboard was quite terrible. So Source Parts, using the Popcorn computer brand, is attempting to bring a next-gen version of this pocket chip back to life. This is if they can hit their Kickstarter goal of 50K. So now we go on to some of the features of this new device, and I must admit that the first one for me is actually quite shocking. They're going to have a 1920 by 1080 resolution with a 4.95-inch touchscreen. 5 inches at 1920 by 1080? God, you're going to need some really powerful glasses to read that. They have RGB backlighting. They're going to have an unnamed 1.2 gigahertz quad-core Cortex A53 SoC, likely the all-winner H64, 2 gigabyte of DDR3 and 32 gigabyte of eMMC memory, a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 4 USB-C connections, and wait for it, all this for $199. Or if you want a wireless chip included, $299. So my question is going to be, if I can get a PrimeBook Pro for $199 or a PrimeBook phone for $150, where's this going to fit in the marketplace?
The people who want a laptop that fit in their pocket.
Yes.
And that's what this is going to have the capability of doing, is it?
I actually owned the Pocket Chip by Nexthing when it came out. I was one of the folks who purchased this device, and then I got it and I turned it on, and I was like, okay, what do I do now with this thing? So I couldn't find a particular use case for it. I'm not saying there's not one. The Pocket Chip, though, was designed, it seems, a lot around games you would love, Zeb, very pixelated ones. Whereas this device seems to be more geared towards, especially with the connections for USB-C connections and things, as having that kind of portable, I wouldn't say laptop alternative, but more of like a portable kind of tablet that you could do potentially. I don't know, Noah, is this something you could use even with the USB-C connections to plug into servers and say, do some basic, monitoring, see what's going on, pull up an error log, that type of thing? What would you use
or just have a device on me that like I can store data on, right? This all kind of ties together with the Pine phone, with UBports, with the Libram phone. Like I really believe there is a market for people that trust their laptops, like their laptops, because they're system administrators, because they have a certain workflow, because they have certain tool sets that they count on. And those tool sets do not exist on Android or on iOS. And so there are two ways of going about this. The first thing is there are the people that just take their laptop with them everywhere. That's why this backpack comes with me and is never more than a foot away from me. And then there's the other kind of people who have tried to reinvent the wheel through the mobile operating systems. But the problem with the mobile operating systems route is, again, as we've discussed ad nauseum, none of us really actually trust iOS or Android. And so we need another solution. So as companies are doing stuff like this, I think the original Pocket PC was, in my opinion, was the Libretto 70 CT or 50 CT, made by Toshiba. It was a pocket-sized, like 5-inch computer. I still have mine. It ran at the time Windows 95 and had all of the functionality, features, ports, the whole thing you'd need off of a laptop, except it fit inside of your pocket. And then we did the UMPC thing for a while, and that didn't really take off. And Sony kind of tried it, and it never really took off mainstream. And I think as those computers kind of died off, and people have gone towards now wanting technology they carry in their pocket, there's even more of a draw for a device like that. And so I think GPD has kind of touched on it and almost kind of got it, and then they kind of backed off for Linux. I think something Raspberry Pi level, Pine level is way better.
But wouldn't your Sailfish OS do things that this thing could do? So wouldn't that be a better solution?
You could put Sailfish on it, probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. But again, like, looking at the photos of this thing, it looks like this is designed as a laptop that fits in your pocket, a physical keyboard, USB ports that mount and unmount media. And you're right. I have hacked. I'm using Sailfish OS to fill this need. I'm not convinced that Sailfish OS is the only thing that could fill this need, or that it couldn't be improved upon, or something couldn't be done better. At this moment, yeah, I would agree. If you're looking for an alternative to Android or iOS, and your primary purpose is to have something Linux based that is secure and has the functionality of a Linux computer, then I agree, Sailfish OS is the place to go.
So one of the things that was a disaster on the Pocket PC, the original Pocket chip, the original one, was the keyboard itself. It had very small circular keys. They were very hard to press. Typing anything was a disaster on it. But if you look at this new redesigned device prototype they have, it actually looks really nice. They have the nice rubberized raised keyboard keys that looks like you could actually type on this device effectively and do some commands and things on it. I think it's neat, and the price is right, because the big holding block, I think, for things like the P530 when it came out, which is the Sony you were talking about, Noah, which I wanted one so bad, but the price was insane. It was like $800 when it came out for this little tiny Pocket PC, if I recall. And then you have the GPD Pocket PC, which is still a pretty high price little device to stick in your pocket, but is probably the best thing out there right now. This kind of hits that sweet spot for me on price of something that, hey, I may not use it all the time, but then again, it's only $199. So, that's not a terrible amount of money to invest in something, should it not work out perfectly. I just don't know if the form factor, the way they've done the keyboard and things, is going to, hopefully it looks a lot like the prototype, and it'll be a lot better than the Pocket chip. But it's interesting little device. They've only raised $3,000 of the 50 they need. So if this is something you are interested in, it definitely could use some support.
Yeah, it looks like it has a lot of potential. It kind of reminds me of like a combination of like a netbook and a Switch in a way. It's an interesting concept, and I think it looks if the prototype becomes the real one, I think it looks pretty good, and hopefully they are able to make it come to reality.
Yep.
Fedora Workstation is in a little hot water because they're getting complaints over the GNOME App Store recommending, are you ready for this? Proprietary software.
Say it ain't so.
The issue is when Flatpak support is enabled, a GNOME software store will run banners promoting things like, are you ready for this? Spotify and Dropbox.
No!
And I know this is going to be a game changer for you. I know this is going to be shocking. They're not FOSS.
Oh my gosh.
The suggestions at this point are that Fedora to filter these results out. And of course, this begs the question, should Linux software stores promote proprietary software that, everybody that runs on a Linux box probably has installed anyway? Or are these banners just harmless promoters of the software that everybody wants to install when they sit down to their desktop? Like, you're never going to find anybody more interested in doing things with free and open source software. You're never going to find anybody more interested in self-hosting and doing those things. That said, what the last thing we really need on the Linux desktop is right now? We really don't need people trying to figure out ways to take the pieces of software that the vast majority of people want to use when they get onto the platform and figure out ways to move that out of the way so that people don't think to install that. We don't need that. That's not I don't think that's a valuable thing we should be working on. I'm sure there are probably free and open source respecting, alternatives to things like Spotify. I just use QMMP, but if you don't want Spotify, you just won't install Spotify. And if you want Spotify, chances are you don't care if it's proprietary or not, right? I don't have Spotify installed on my computer. I could care less if the App Store recommends it.
And by the way, I don't disagree with you at all, but just for the devil advocate position, people are stating, why do you need a banner? Why not use that banner, that big space at the top when you open up, to promote open source and not promote proprietary software, which people like you said are probably going to go and install anyways? Why not use that as an opportunity to promote some of the open source software instead?
Because I think it's a clever way of letting people know that if you're coming from Windows, you can get this software and it's really easy.
Bingo. Because the job of the banner is not to promote one thing or the other. The job of the banner is to direct users to help them find the things that they want to find. So when they open up the App Store, if 85% of users are installing Skype and Spotify and I don't know, Microsoft Edge, I guess, is a thing that we're going to have to deal with now on Linux. Like, if those are the things that people are opening up to install, then TeamViewer, for example, right? Then it doesn't matter if they're open, so what the license is. What matters is the user satisfaction is going to be directly proportional to how fast they can find those things. And it's why Martin Wimpress inside of the Ubuntu Mate launcher has all sorts of apps that it will just go out and install, because he knows, like everybody else knows that's ever supported anybody that's transitioned to Linux, they just want to use the same programs they've used on whatever platform they're coming from. And the more of those boxes we can check, the happier they're going to be. And if you're a person that cares about free and open source, don't install those apps. Just put a little red banner that says this software is not free and open source, or a little like tagline,
or
if the
set an
license isn't already
option.
there.
Just make an option in the system, in the software app.
That's the recommendation, right? To have filters. I feel like we're spending time solving problems that
don't exist.
They're saying the suggestion and they were giving was to have like a filter in the system. I'm saying like an option for the users to say, I only want to see FOSS stuff. Don't show me anything else. But like that shouldn't be the default.
Do we need to spend resources building that out? I mean,
I don't think so.
Exactly. No. So we're going to take some developer and we're going to ask him, hey, instead of fixing this bug or fixing this thing, could you please go add a thing so that it doesn't show any of the proprietary? Like, why do we have to bury our heads in the sand? The people that care about FOSS, it's not like it's some evil infection. It's just you want to stick your head in the sand because you don't want to see the other software options that are out there. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm just wondering though, you mentioned a very good point there that Ubuntu Mate has all of these proprietary software applications in their software boutique and you can install them at a click of a button. Are people particularly concerned because isn't Fedora meant to be a starting point with FOSS, and they make it a little bit difficult to get all these other proprietary bits and pieces in? Isn't that what Fedora was originally? Because I know that you have to put
codecs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So are they going to fuss because it's Fedora and they're worried that they're losing a mainstream FOSS advocate by having these? I mean, I think it's
really not Fedora. It's the GNOME store that Fedora pulls in, and they're wanting Fedora to basically create some filtering to the GNOME store that they pull in for the desktop part. And, I try to see this side because, yes, I want FOSS software to be the most popular. I want people to understand it. I want people to give it a try instead of just going to the mainstream thing that they've always tried their whole life. Because I think they'll find in a lot of cases the FOSS alternative is just as good, if not better. At the same time, I think what you guys said is absolutely the truth. You want people who are coming to it for the first time to start with the software they're comfortable with and not immediately boot back into Windows because they go, hey, I needed that Spotify that I couldn't figure out any way to get it on there except this 800 command line terminal voodoo thing they want me to put in that I don't even know what it does to get it installed. And, that's an issue. I don't know we need to throw it in a banner though. Does it need to be in the banner? Why not have a little highlight in? I guess you could argue it, but that's really an argument towards GNOME software, not towards Fedora. Because
it's definitely not a Fedora thing.
Wasting their time doing this.
I think it's a waste of time for Fedora. I don't think it's a waste of time for GNOME because that applies to all distros that use the GNOME software. And I think if they wanted to do that, that's fine to create. Don't put it in the banner. You don't need to promote it.
It's GNOME, not GNOME. I just wanted to help you out.
No, it
actually is GNOME.
No, it's a GNOME.
It's
GNOME. You can be
it's GNOME.
You can be wrong if you want. It's fine. So
wrong.
there's I think they shouldn't do the banner idea because I think that would be like it would send a negative message to the people who don't care, and the people who do care could just go and have a setting that says, okay, this is a tag that says it's proprietary. I don't want it.
Okay, so
that could be fine. but GNOME should
Answer
do
me
it.
this. Is it only proprietary software that hits that banner, or does
No,
it
I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so.
No,
I
it's
think
it's just a combination. They're just like this is people what they look at it and
Then
say
I'm
this is
sorry.
what people want, and they give it to them. And like it could be they could also want Firefox on something distro that doesn't
probably
have that by
based on their
default.
most downloaded apps.
Well, I've got 3 simple words that can sum this up. Yeah, get over it.
Pretty much.
It's called GNOME.
Our spotlight this week is the best password manager on the planet, Bitwarden. It is just one of the best things about Bitwarden is not only is it a great password manager, but it's also cross-platform and open source. You can
It should go on the banner for GNOME.
Yeah, why not? It totally should. That's one of the things that they should consider. Bitwarden is a great application. If you've ever wanted to use any kind of password management, this is one. In my opinion, it's the best option, period. So it has access to mobile apps for Android and iOS. You have a desktop application. You can have integration with your various browsers that you use. It has a lot of different features. The really, really cool stuff. It also has the ability to sync all your devices without any issues. You can store as many items in your vault as much as you want. There's no limits. And this is all for the free version, by the way. You can have secure notes, logins, credit cards, even much more, all kinds of stuff. You can do, whether you do password generation, you can do passphrase generation, and you can do two-factor authentication. You can self-host it on your own server if you want to, and all of this stuff you can do for free. Now, they have a premium version if you want, but it's ridiculously cheap. It's $10 a year. So if you want to give them a thank you for doing creating this software, you can do that for a very small amount.
Can it make phone calls?
Well, they don't claim that they could.
Well,
so
I feel like we have put this on a different standard than we did other things we discussed.
you can
during
put
the
it on
show.
a phone that has the ability to do phone calls. That's an option.
Cool. That's a benefit.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that after this particular spotlight, people will know about it, so everything's going to be good.
That's true. They will know about it. But one of the things I like about it is that here's a quote from them. It's about the open source aspect. They say, "We believe that being open source is one of the most important features of Bitwarden. Source code transparency is absolute requirement for software solutions like Bitwarden." And that kind of like a philosophy and that standpoint is why I think Bitwarden is such a great piece of software. Like they recognize the importance of this, and they've also been audited. They've had for many years, they've had a casual audits and like bug fixes and stuff like that. But they've also had a full audit with Cure 53, which is like one of the top 3 companies that do this sort of thing. And they didn't find any huge big bugs, and all the bugs they did find were minor, and they fixed them all. So like, I think Bitwarden is a solid option, and if you want to do password manager, definitely check it out. At least consider it anyway. And if you also already have a password manager, it has support for migration for like everything. So
I was on LastPass. You wouldn't shut up about Bitwarden, so I was like, "Fine, Michael, I'll give it a try." And you were right. It's better. It's the best password manager I've ever used.
Yeah,
by far.
And also, we not only did I convinced Ryan, he convinced me to do a video about it with him. So we have actually some videos on our channels about Bitwarden, so you can find out. Like we go into much more depth about why Bitwarden is great, and we do like tutorials about like how to do migrations, how to do different things in the different videos. So be sure to check those out. I'll have a link to those in the description and the show notes as well.
We'll talk about self-hosting, and we encourage you to self-host. In fact, hey, if you're looking for a password manager, you should probably self-host it, and you could probably self-host Bitwarden. Here's the problem. You say to yourself, I'd love to self-host. I don't have the time to figure out how to set up a LAMP stack. There's like 4 things I'd have to set up. That's why it says, I don't want to do all of those things. How do I just get the self-hosted thing ready to run? Well, one option is you could go to do.co/DL and use one of DigitalOcean's one-click installers. But what if you wanted to have that kind of functionality on your own hardware? What would you do? Well, you'd go to turnkeylinux.org, and Turnkey Linux is a site that has pre-built VMs for everything you can imagine. They have a LAMP stack, they have WordPress, they have a file server, they have OpenVPN, they have Redmine, they have OpenLDAP, OTRS if you wanted the ticket system, a domain controller. How would you like a free domain controller for Windows systems? How would you like to spin up an instance of GitLab? How would you like a media server? How would you like MySQL, torrent server, Postgres, you name it? They've got all of these pre-built VMs, and they're available at the site, turnkeylinux.org. And so I went to set up a blog, and I clicked on their little app thing, and I went, okay, I want a content system. I wonder what's available for blogging, and I came across a new a platform that I had not previously played with. Michael, you're probably familiar with it, Ghost. And I thought, well, I don't know if Ghost is good or bad or better than WordPress, but I'd like to check it out. So I just downloaded the Turnkey appliance, imported it into libvirt, and started it up. And like in 5 seconds, I had a Ghost platform. And then it has a little guide, a little wizard that walks you through changing some of the default passwords and stuff. And you can have a full-on running server just by downloading this thing from turnkeylinux.org. And I came across it, thought, why is nobody talking about this site? There's not some sort of like got you that it only works for 30 days and then you have to like sign up for an account to get it to keep going, or it doesn't seem like they do anything terribly weird on the back end. They just they have some install scripts and stuff. It just seems like a really cool site and nobody really talks about it. So I thought I'd bring some attention to it and make it this week's tips and tricks.
I agree. And I never talked about it because I didn't know it existed. So thank you. And I think Ghost is a great platform. It's mostly a static site generator type thing. And Ghost is a really good option. And this is a really cool way to really quickly try it in comparison to other things. It has WordPress too, so you can test it out if you want to. That's pretty. I like it. So I'm definitely gonna try it out after the show.
In 9 months.
Well, technically, I said after the show. Any time after this show is accurate. I didn't.
He's not wrong.
I didn't
about that.
say right after.
A big thank you for each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. We love our patrons, so we just want to give a special shout out to all of you for your support. We do a live show for our patrons, so you can come and join us and be a part of the show. And we've also recently added sponsors to the mix. Ko-fi is going away, so if you are a Ko-fi subscriber today, please move over to the sponsors platform, as we will soon be discontinuing that. But you can join us on Patreon or Patreon or sponsors and get all the same perks and tiers, all for one low price that is frankly darn near free. We give it away, all of these extra hours of the show that you could watch.
Speaking of support, become a part of the GNU community by going to destinationlinux.network and joining our GNU forums, our GNU Mumble server, all running on GNU Linux. And we have Linux for Everybody, Das Geek This Week in Linux, The Ask Noah Show, Tux Digital, Zebedee Boss. Basically, if there's a show about Linux and you want to hear it, you could probably find it at destinationlinux.network, just saying. There are so many methods that you can interact with us, so many methods in ways to which you can get in contact with. In fact, if you can't think or imagine a way to get in contact with us or communicate with us or participate with us, then you're not trying hard enough, because we're on Telegram, we're on Discord, Twitter, Mastodon, any way that do we have Facebook? We should probably have Facebook. We're probably on,
we don't have Facebook.
We don't have Facebook because Ryan doesn't like social networks.
Yes.
But if you want to join us, there are so many freedom and privacy respecting ways to do so, and all of them are available to you on one simple website. It's destinationlinux.network. So go to destinationlinux.network, visit there, see all the stuff that we have, see all of the infrastructure that Michael took together. And if all of that infrastructure is there, he probably started working on it 7.5 years ago.
I mean, you're not wrong. I was working on creating the network like 5 years ago, so you're pretty close.
We know, Michael.
You're pretty close.
We know.
Yes, we know, Michael.
So please get back to us and provide some feedback or ask any questions you may have. There are numerous methods you can do this. Email, and this is what I forgot earlier on in the show, comments@destinationlinux.org. So send in your emails or send in your little video clips. Please keep the comments and questions coming. We love to read them and hear of ways we might be able to improve the show. You can also find us on our Telegram group, our Discord, Discourse, Twitter, Mastodon, and a plethora of other ways that Michael has put together at destinationlinux.org/contact. And finally, don't forget to join our Mumble server. Chat with the community, set up gaming sessions, and enjoy networking.
And if you want more content, the fun does not stop here. We have all our own channels that you can check out. You can check out Ryan at youtube.com/DOSGeek, where he fills your brains on hardware, software, and all things Linux. Zeb can be found on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/ZebedieBoss, where you can find him playing various games like Project Cars, Euro Truck Simulator, all kinds of something on his YouTube channel. You can find my content at touchdigital.com, where I do an in-depth weekly Linux news podcast. That's actually what I normally say. This Week in Linux and other Linux-related contents. And you can check out Noah's show on the Ask Noah Show. He has a weekly talk radio show at 6 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. Join him, and he'll answer all the Linux and techs and your tech questions. So be sure to like that smash button and share the show on social media. And everybody have a great week. And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
That was brilliant, man. Not gonna lie.
Thanks, everyone.
That takes true dedication. Have a good week. See you next week.
Good week.
Destination. It's as awkward as saying GNOME.
Then we succeeded.
Yes.
And for once, that wasn't me. So top dollar, whoever did that.
I think it was Ryan.
Of course.